Well, if you didn't know what Pokemon that was, then you're about to learn now. Because today on Vintage Poke Openings, we're going to be taking a look at the different kinds of Machamp cards there are from the original Wizards of the Coast Pokemon base set. The reason why we're doing this is because there's many different variants of the Machamp card, and there's a lot of confusion out there in the Pokemon community as to which one is which, how much they're worth. If you go on eBay, you'll see ridiculous prices for some of these Machamp cards, even though a lot of them were mass-produced and there's a lot of them out there in circulation. So I'm making this video to clear up some of that confusion and inform you all as to what Machamp cards are out there. So when it comes to the base set, there's four primary versions of the Machamp. You've got the most common, which is the first one listed here. That's your first edition holographic non-shadowless. You also have a first edition non-shadowless Cosmos holofoil Machamp. So it's the same card as the first bullet point here, but just a slightly different holofoil. Thirdly, you have the first edition holographic Shadowless card, which is the same as the first bullet point, except it's shadowless. And then lastly, you have the very rare Trainer Deck A variant of the Machamp card. And we're going to talk about the details as well as the pricing information for all four of these Machamps. Now the first one here is the first edition holographic non-shadowless. This is by far the most common variant of the Machamp card. So you see it on the left-hand side of the screen there. It is a first edition Machamp. It does have a shadow to the right of the image, and it's the standard Galaxy holofoil that was present on all of the base set, jungle, and fossil holographic cards. Now this card came in the base set the base set 2-player starter deck. And if you see the video here that I'm showing, we actually opened one of these on the channel way back last summer. It was part of a starter set gift box, actually, but we opened one of these on the channel and we actually pulled a bonus Machamp, which is pretty cool. But we pulled 2 shadowed holographic first edition Machamps. And you'll notice that in the second bullet point, every version of this card is first edition. So this specific Machamp card, when they were doing the print run way back in the day, Wizards of the Coast accidentally printed the first edition label on every single one of these Machamp cards. So even though it is first edition, it really doesn't hold any more value than another Machamp card because of the fact, once again, that they're all first edition. So keep that in mind. If you ever open up one of these base set 2-player starter decks, the Machamp is guaranteed to be first edition. The average price for a PSA 10 Machamp is $2,002.56. So this specific Machamp card, if you have it in a PSA 10, averages out to about $2,002, but it has maxed out at $3,150. So even though this card, there's a ton of them out there in circulation, and you can find sealed versions of this everywhere you look on eBay, it still can actually fetch you a pretty penny if it gets a PSA 10 grade. However, you'll see a lot of cards like this out there on eBay, people trying to sell them for $1,000 ungraded, $10,000 ungraded. It is not worth that much. The base set 2-player starter deck by itself is probably about $600 at the time that I'm creating this video. So definitely don't pay anything over that for one of these Machamp cards. Your best bet is to just buy one of those base set 2-player starter decks and then crack it open. And it's unlikely that the Machamp is going to get a PSA 10, but it could get a 9, could get an 8. Mine happened to come back an 8. I thought it was going to be a 9, but you can still get some good value for it in PSA 9, so that's just something to consider. So once again, this first edition holo non-shadowless Machamp card is the most common variant and arguably the least valuable of them all. Now the second type of Machamp card we have is the first edition Cosmos holofoil Machamp card. This is going to look almost identical to the card that we just looked at a moment ago, except the only difference is the holofoil is the Cosmos holofoil as opposed to the Galaxy holofoil. If you look at the image there on the left, you can see that there's kind of like bubbles in the holofoil, whereas there are stars in the Galaxy holofoil, which was on the previous card. Now, this one comes in the base set 2-player starter deck. The previous card comes in the base set 2-player starter deck. We also opened one of these on the channel, And this happened to be the CD-ROM variant of the base set 2 two-player starter deck. You can also get this card in the VHS variant of the two-player starter deck from base set 2, so just keep that in mind. But just like the previous Machamp card, these are all going to be in first edition as well. You're not going to see an unlimited print of this card. It's going to be almost identical to the previous Machamp we looked at. It's just the holofoil is a little bit different, and it comes in a different product than the previous Machamp did. Now, I tried to determine the highest price for this card in a PSA 10, but it was really difficult to do. And the reason for that is, even though PSA recognizes this as a separate Machamp, meaning like the label at the top of the card will say Cosmos Holofoil, they don't have a separate section for it on their website, or at least not that I could find. They have a section for the Shadowless Machamp, the non-Shadowless Machamp, and the Trainer Deck A Machamp, but they didn't have one for the Cosmos Holofoil. And then I thought, well, maybe they have it listed under the base set 2 set, since this card technically is included in the base set 2 product, even though it doesn't have the base set 2 logo, but it still didn't show there. So I don't, like I said, I could have overlooked it on their website, but I couldn't find a specific listing for this card. So then I went to eBay and I tried to search sales for PSA 10 Cosmos Holofoil Machamps, and I really couldn't find a ton of information either. There were a few out there, but the highest price really wasn't clear. So this one is probably a little bit less valuable than the previous Machamp if I had to guess. I personally think it's a better looking card just because I prefer the Cosmos Holofoil over Galaxy, but it's still a relatively valuable card if you get it in a 10, and ultimately it's probably a little bit less valuable than the Machamp that came in the regular base set two-player starter deck. So that's the first edition Cosmos Holofoil Machamp. The third variant of the Machamp card is going to be the first edition holographic Shadowless. So this is also very similar to the first card we looked at, except you'll notice if you look where the blue arrow is pointing, there is no shadow to the right of the Machamp image. So, and that's really the same difference between all shadowless and non-shadowless cards, is the shadow that you typically see to the right of that image on most Pokemon cards that are in your collection. The shadowless cards do not have it. This also, however, came in the base set two-player starter deck. And you might be asking yourself, well, you know, how do I know which two-player starter deck is going to have a shadowless variant versus a non? While there isn't a guarantee, if you look at the back of the base set two-player starter decks and you look to the bottom right of the box, you're going to see that some of them are going to have a slew of just regular Pokemon cards, whereas on the other type of box, the display is going to have a slew of energy cards that are listed. If the back of your base set two-player starter deck has the energy cards in the display image instead of like the Pokemon cards, that's the first indicator that it might have the Shadowless Machamp inside. So that's the first thing I look for if I'm looking on eBay and I'd like to buy one of these and I want to go for that Shadowless Machamp. I look for those energy cards on the back of the box, as you can see in the image. So ultimately, I actually do have one of these that's being graded at PSA right now. However, I didn't get it in one of those base set two-player starter decks. I actually got it from a card store, a local card store here, and this would have been, I think, in November of 2019. So a few months before the pandemic started, I got it for $4, and it's not in great shape. I would say it's probably in PSA 7 shape, maybe. But $4 for a Shadowless Machamp is a great deal. So I picked that up, and I'm hoping it'll get a high grade. We'll just have to see what happens when it comes back. But I did some research on this, and as of the current date, the highest price for a PSA 10 Shadowless Machamp came back as $7,500. So it's a pretty nice chunk of change if you're able to come across a PSA 10 Shadowless Machamp, but these aren't quite as many of these in circulation as the shadowed ones are, just because, like I said, there's only a very small or a limited amount of the base set two-player starter decks that were printed with it compared to its other counterparts. So. And the last variant of Machamp, as well as the most valuable, is going to be the Trainer Deck A Machamp. Now, Trainer Deck A was one of two promotional theme decks that Pokemon, or I should say Wizards of the Coast, released before the game was ever officially brought over to America. So the Pokemon TCG was prevalent in Japan, and they were testing the market in America, and they created what was called the Trainer Deck A and the Trainer Deck B. The Trainer Deck A came with a non-holo, non-first edition Machamp, as you can see in the image on the left-hand side of the screen there. And Trainer Deck B came with a non-holo, non-first edition version of Blastoise. So these trainer decks are very limited. If you do happen to find one out there on the market that's still sealed, it's going to be extremely expensive because these were basically the test cards for what was going to be the Pokemon TCG. And you can easily identify that too by just looking at the back of one of these cards. It'll have the red border instead of the blue, as you see there, and it'll say either Trainer Deck A or Trainer Deck B. So this is the only Machamp that does not have the first edition logo, and it's the only Machamp that is not holographic from the base set. So I just wanted to point that out. It's an extremely low population card. At PSA, there's only 7 sales that are recognized for this card. There could be some more out there that just haven't been graded, obviously, or have been graded, but they haven't been sold. But it looks to me like the pop right now is at 7 only. And the highest price for a PSA 10 sale was actually $10,100. So we're looking at a 5-figure card if you can get this in PSA 10, but that's extremely difficult to do. They're hard enough to find, let alone to get one in PSA 10. So this is the most valuable Machamp card. Now, there are some other variants of the Machamp that I didn't talk about in this video, mainly because they aren't really different variants of the Machamp card. They're just different, there's different print details to them. So what I mean by that specifically is there are what are called thick stamp versus thin stamp first edition versions of the Machamp. So it's not that the card itself is really any different, it just means that the first edition stamp, the number 1 is either a little bit thicker or it's a little bit thinner. I don't really know if PSA recognizes that yet. I'd have to really go through and look at the labels, but I don't think they do at this point in time. BGS, Beckett Grading Services, very well may. I don't go through them, however, so I'm not entirely sure. But you can also have a thick stamp versus a thin stamp. And then another variant of the Machamp that I didn't talk about in this video is the 4th print version. So if you look at the bottom of any of these Machamp cards, you're going to see it says 1995, 96, and 98, and then Nintendo Creatures, Game Freak, so on and so forth. The bottom of the 4th print card is going to say 1999, 2000. And the 4th print was basically the last print run of the base set. And I think, could be wrong, but I know it was printed originally, I think in the UK is what it was. So that was the UK version of the base set. It came out a little bit later than obviously Japan and the American versions of the base set. So it's got that 1999, 2000 print on it. And once again, it's not that the card is really any different in any way other than just the copyright at the bottom is 1999 to 2000s instead of 95, 96, and 98. So there you have it. Those are all the different kinds of Machamps. Hopefully this was informative for you folks, and now you have a better idea as to which Machamp card you have and what's the most valuable. Hopefully this helps you make a more informed decision if you're going to buy any of these online. There's a lot of scammers out there that will overprice these cards by 500%, and I'm sure unfortunately they do get some suckers that will pay it. So just watch this video if you're curious to know anything about this, and thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time.